Well, welcome everybody to our 2022 training for the Freight Project Priorities Program. I know a lot of you who've registered have been through this process before, and there's a bunch of new faces as well. We're doing a little bit different strategy this year, which we'll talk about as we get into the agenda. But I do want to go to the next slide first and just talk about how everybody will be participating today. So we are using Zoom as the new platform for this training for a couple reasons. One is that it allows us to record and create a resource for you all and anyone who couldn't make the meeting today to go back and watch the training in preparation for the next one. And I'm sure everybody is probably more familiar with Zoom than I am by this point. So this is we've promoted everybody to panelists because we want all of you to have full functionality to participate today. If you have questions, raise your hand and unmute, wait to be called on, and we'll give you a chance to weigh in, ask a question. Also, please feel free to use the chat box. We'll be monitoring that and we can read those questions into the group as well. And also it gives us a way to kind of track multiple conversations at once as necessary. Following this meeting, hopefully by tomorrow, Monday at the latest, we'll have the recording as a YouTube link for you to use as a resource moving forward as you complete your applications this year. Next slide. So our agenda today, we're going to go through introductions and talk a little bit about the training session goals, give everybody a chance to introduce themselves like we've done over the last several years, and chat a little bit about some of the inputs you gave when you registered. We'll do our normal review of history and purpose of the program, talk a little bit about how it's changing this year. As you recall, we typically try to enhance the program from year to year over the last 4 years to incorporate feedback that we get from you all during the application process, so that we're always trying to look for ways to make the process better, easier, and more effective. We also, of course, have some materials to walk through with you, some checklists, the applications, the instructions, everything you'll need to know to provide information for your projects. One of the things that's going to be new this year, which is one of the changes to our training program, is we are moving to an online web portal for the application process. So that Word document in a form that you had to fill out in the past has been turned into an online application to make it easier for you. Also, for any of you who want to resubmit your 2021 projects, those will be loaded in this program for you to review and resubmit as appropriate, and also to kind of remind you where all the information goes as you move forward. So that brings us to really the purpose of our training today, is to get you ready for the training for the new system. We'll walk through, do everything we've normally done in past years. And then on the second training on March 15th, which we'll give you some reminders several times today, will be a how-to and training on how to use that new web portal. We will go through roles and responsibilities schedules, what to expect, when to expect it, when things will be due. And as I mentioned, as we go through the conversation here today, please feel free to raise your hand and interject. This is for you to answer any questions that you have. Next slide. So I know we asked everybody to provide some input on your registration process. It seems like we have lots of folks who've been here before, folks looking for an overview of the process, an update to what's changed, clarity on how to move forward with this year versus previous years. And some folks are new to the process. So we wanted to do is just take a little time here for each of you to introduce yourselves, give us a little bit of information about, again, why you're here, what you hope to get out of this, and any questions that you may have that we can put on the board to make sure we address moving forward. So I can look from my list here as far as who's here. Oh, I guess I could have started with myself. My name is Mike Williamson with Cambridge Systematics. I've been supporting this program since its inception back in 2017, I guess. And I've been working with most of you on your applications over that time frame. I'm happy to be here to help you in 2022. Tom?
I guess I'm up next. My name is Tom Brandenstein. I'm with White House Group. I'm new to White House Group and new to the FPP program, but I have been fast learning from Mike and Todd Brower, who I work with at White House Group, the history of the program and all these new changes that are happening for this year, and excited to assist you in any way you guys need. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom. Erin?
I'm Erin LaSala, also with Cambridge Systematics. I'm also relatively new to the program, just like Tom, but I'm here to help you out and answer any questions you may have.
Alex?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. This is Alex Trauger with MetroPlan Orlando. I manage our freight planning work here in Orlando. So this effort is really important. So I thank Greg and everyone at the Broward MPO and Mike and his team for putting this effort together. My involvement has been submitting, candidate projects for the past 3-4 years now, it feels like, since I've been back with the MPO. And it's good to see kind of the benefits yielding in the FDOT work program. So my major takeaway is just to kind of make sure our projects are eligible and you have the information you need. And we want to leave with big checks. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Alex. I didn't mean to actually skip over you, George. If you want to, we have several folks here helping run our meeting today to make sure that it goes smoothly. George, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, Mike. Yes, my name is George Sotolongo. I also have Manny. That we are from GraphCode. We're supporting this actual build tool meeting. So if you guys have any technical difficulties, need to do something, don't know how, please don't feel bad for asking. Our role here is to make sure that everything runs well and smooth. So thank you.
Thanks, George. Manny?
As George said, if you need anything, just let us know. Contact in the chat.
All right. And Manny, you'll monitor the chat, and if we miss it, you'll let us know something popped up, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Alicia.
Hi there, Alicia Gonzalez. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm part of the consultant team that's also here to try to help you in any way we can. We're also working on more of the communications aspects, the logos, a lot more of the looks and feels of how we're presenting our materials and how we are doing hopefully an even better job than the outstanding job that has been done altogether. Like someone else said, I think it was Alex, to bring back those checks.
Great, thank you. Lisa.
Lisa Silva, Hillsborough TPO. I mostly work on safety and design projects, but somehow I'm also doing freight, so I'll fill it out again. So just here to learn.
Thanks, Lisa. Mark.
Oh, sorry, struggling to hit the unmute button. Yeah, Mark Reichert, the new executive director for the MPOAC. This isn't my first go around through this, but it's going to be interesting to see it from a slightly different perspective this year. So just learning, just looking forward to learning, getting better acquainted with the process. Yeah.
Thanks, Mark. Mary Beth.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Mary Beth Soderstrom with the Heartland Regional TPO. We have been submitting projects through this process, I think, since 17 or 18, whenever the beginning was. So just here to learn any changes or things that we could all do better to have better projects.
Great, thank you. Paul.
Afternoon all, Paul Flavian, Broward MPO, Data Services Manager, but I'm also responsible for the freight work here at the Broward MPO. And I've been the project manager for the excellent consultant support we've had for this, for the MPOAC Freight Committee since its inception. My takeaway today is to get a nice preview of the new way that we're going to be doing this online. So looking forward to it.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Ricardo.
Sorry about that. Ricardo Vasquez, Senior Planner with the Martin MPO, as well as Lucine Martins, Planner with the Martin MPO. The both of us are relatively new to this application system for freight prioritization. So we are looking forward to getting all the information.
Great, thank you, Ricardo. And Scott.
Good afternoon. I'm Scott Ferry, and I'm with the Pasco County MPO. And I'm fairly new to the MPO world in Florida and to Pasco County. And I will be leading the development of a freight plan for Pasco County in the upcoming year. And I'm looking forward to learning how to take projects that are identified and recommended from the plan and submit those for development.
Great, thank you. And Slade and Nina.
Hi, Slade Downs and
Nina Venter.
We are multimodal planners for the Sarasota Manatee MPO. Both fairly new to FPP, so we can learn.
Absorb as much information as possible.
There you go.
Great. Looking at the list, I don't think I missed anybody. Is there anyone who hasn't had a chance to introduce themselves? Okay, so with everything that you folks have said, I think it's right in line with what we've identified for our training session 1 goals. Make sure you all understand the purpose and process. Make sure you're understanding any changes that have happened since 2021. And to provide you with an overview of the resource materials that we will make available to you following this meeting to make sure you have what you need to get us what we need to get your project on our list. So if there aren't any other questions, let's move on to the next slide. So before we get into what the, kind of what we're doing this year and a little bit more of a detailed overview of the program, for those of you who've been around, you won't be surprised to see this, but some of the rest of you may be interested to see kind of what we've done over the last 4 years. So you can see beginning in 2018 through 2021, we've had almost 2/3 of our MPOs have submitted projects on an annual basis. You can see how those numbers reflect in the top left corner. That reflects on average 34 projects for the state each year, any from as low as 30 to as high as 37. Most years we've had all 7 of our Florida DOT districts covered by those project submittals. In the top right corner, you can see that many of the projects that you all have been submitting fall on the strategic intermodal system, and many of them also fall on the National Highway Freight Network. And we'll talk a little bit about why those things are important as we move through the program overview here today. All of the projects that you've been submitting since 2019 have addressed at least 3 of the Florida Transportation Plan goals. And since in large part, over the last 4 years, we've been trying to influence funding priorities as established by Florida DOT, making sure that these projects address what they're trying to accomplish obviously helps us along the way. Next slide. One of the questions that we've gotten each of the last 4 years, and I know Alex, you've been one of the few who's asked this as well, and several other MPOs, is why should I go to the process of submitting a project? What am I going to get out of this? And so what we were able to do with Florida DOT's input was to identify from the list of projects that we submitted in 2021, how many of those have received some amount of funding from the National Highway Freight Network funds. And you can see about just under $60 million worth of funding was allocated to 6 different projects from our list from 2021. We've had a project here and there in the years prior to that, but this is the first year we've had such a direct documentation of some of these projects that have advanced. So of course, as you know, the purpose of this project is to give you all an opportunity to identify and wave the flag for your top freight priorities. and try to get the attention of folks making funding decisions. And so the fact we've been able to see some of these projects move forward with National Highway Freight dollars is one great example of some of the good work that we've accomplished over the last 4 years. Next slide. So what is the purpose of this program? For those of you new to it, this is a pretty high level summary of it. For those of you who have been around for a while, we have this slide in every presentation just to keep everybody focused on what it is we're trying to accomplish. So this program, the Freight Priorities Program, provides MPOs with an opportunity to identify high priority freight projects on an annual basis, and then to use the MPO Advisory Council as a united voice to promote those priorities. So as we mentioned, we're going to be we develop a list every year that says, these are the projects that our MPOs have identified as freight priorities. Please incorporate this into your work program updates when you're allocating your funds, particularly funds through the National Highway Freight Network program, as well as any other CIS funds or other discretionary district funds that you have available. And ultimately, we want to position those projects for those future funding opportunities. So that's really at a big scale what we're trying to accomplish with this program. Next slide. I do want to point out, this doesn't, for those of you who are new, this does not override or replace any of the other mechanisms that you all as MPOs have at your disposal to identify and prioritize your projects. You do it as part of your long-range plans. You do it as part of your tips as you move your projects through the program. This is just an additional opportunity to highlight those projects from a freight perspective that you would like those folks who are promoting and leading the state's freight program should know about and think about when they're allocating the funds they have control over. So what are we trying to, which types of funding programs are we trying to influence? And you all know, based on which network, what roadways, what projects you want to advance, what network it falls on, impacts the type of funding you're eligible for. Hopefully most of you are familiar with the National Highway Freight Network and the National Highway Freight Program funds that goes along with that. That comes down to the states to allocate to projects that fall on that network. Parts of that network can be updated and redesignated or undesignated based on investment needs moving forward. You see that largely with the critical urban and critical rural freight corridor programs that are out there, where you can kind of bring roadways on and off in order to make them eligible for some of this funding sources. We also have the strategic intermodal system, which I know you are all very familiar with, which certainly controls a lot of the capacity, new capacity dollars that Florida DOT uses to advance projects. So when we look at which of your projects fall on that, if you think back to the overview slide I gave you, why so many of the projects fell on one of those two networks is a critical part of how we're trying to influence those funding programs, which in large part represent some of the largest capacity pots of money that are available. We also are looking at funding for all other state highways, which for those of you I know have worked with your local DOT districts for a lot of those dollar allocations through their work program components. And then this year, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the changes in just a moment, but if you look beyond state highway roadways, state roadway system projects, and even beyond roadways into some other modes of transportation, then we're starting to look at additional funding sources, and in some cases, some of the discretionary competitive grants that you all have pursued, largely with USDOT. So the final lists of projects, one of the things that DOT gave us feedback on was if we could identify for them which projects fall on which networks, that helps them figure out which funding programs to consider when they're trying to advance our projects. Next slide. So how has the program changed this year? It's changed this year in the sense that we've had feedback from several of you and others who aren't on the phone here today over the years to say, hey, my biggest freight priority may not be on the state highway system. It may not be a roadway project. How can I participate in this program if that's the case? So you can see, and several of you participated in a survey that we had late last year to capture some input from you all on how you'd like to see this program expanded. And then we've made some changes and got approval from the MPOAC Freight and Rail Committee in January to make these changes. And what the changes, as you see here, are to expand the program to accept off-state highway system roadway projects, as well as intermodal logistics center access projects, so roadway or rail improvements to an ILC, truck parking projects, and rail projects, whether they're on or off the SIS. You all voted to maintain the 3-project limit for state highway system roadway projects. We'll talk a little bit about this requirements for those of you who are new to the program in a moment, but we did limit how many projects you could submit to 3. But now we're going to allow you to submit an additional 3 for the non-state highway system roadway or non-roadway projects. We are going to maintain project readiness requirements for all project types. So up to 6 projects would be your limit, and all of them would need to be basically shovel ready to advance funding to move forward. And we will prepare a list that sorts these projects. So we'll still have the traditional list that's trying to influence state highway system projects, and then a separate list that is advancing some of the other types of projects that we've defined here. Our committee members felt it was important that all projects meeting the new eligibility requirements should be used to advance designation or redesignation of facilities on the National Highway Freight Network. So they wanted to tie a lot of this evolution of our program to making projects eligible for some of the federal dollars that are out there. Any questions on these changes before we move forward? Raise your hand if you have one, or unmute and ask a question. Okay. Well, certainly feel free to enter questions at any time in the chat box or raise your hand and we'll get back to you on that. Next slide. So as to what your options are for 2022 on the projects you submit, the left-hand side of the slide is the program we've been doing for the last 4 years. So it features projects that fall on the state highway system. You can submit up to 3 for your agency. They must be post PD&E, have a PD&E underway, or at least have a PD&E funded. And your projects must be able to accept funding. So what do we mean by that? It's either currently unfunded or partially funded or fully funded, but in outer years, and you would like to be able to accelerate that into earlier years. For the second component that's new, which we'll talk a little bit more about here, features non-state highway system projects. As I meant, that could be roadways that are not on the state highway system. That could include projects that provide access to an ILC, which could be a rail project or a roadway project. Truck parking projects, which I know a lot of you have been working on truck parking needs over the last several years, and rail projects. For those type of projects, we will accept up to 3 additional submissions for your agency. Total, right? So you can't do 3 rail projects and 3 ILC access projects, but you can do 3 additional projects that meet those criteria. Projects must also pass a project readiness test, right? So the whole purpose of this program is to advance projects that are ready. So that's a critical part of our program. And that's what we're talking about here when we say must be able to accept funding. So any questions on these 2 types of projects? Okay, let's go to the next slide. So you've seen this flow chart before for those of you who've taken our training for past years, but we've made some changes to it to reflect some of the additional types of projects. So again, starting with step 1, each MPO can choose to submit up to 6 total projects, 3 within each category. So 3 that fall on the state highway system, that's the original project, and 3 that meet those other criteria I mentioned, whether it's an off-state highway system roadway project, ILC access, truck parking, or rail. Projects on both lists will need to meet the respective readiness, as I mentioned. Step 2, projects are submitted through our new online application portal. That link we have here is not active yet, but it will be following our next training session, which will be on March 15th. We're still tweaking that program and getting all of your 2021 projects loaded in. We will show you a few screenshots of what to expect from that program later on as we wrap up our training here today. But each of you will have your own login credentials. They'll be MPO specific. So if there's multiple staff in one MPO, you'll share a login so that anybody can log in from your MPO and provide the information. I know sometimes you need multiple folks to provide different types of information. So we're trying to be flexible from that perspective. And then the 2021 project submission data will be pre-populated, as I mentioned, to facilitate that for you. And you'll also be able to hit create new and enter your complete new set of project data. Step 3, once you've submitted all that information to us, we on behalf of MPOAC will review that information, make sure that you've completed everything, answered all the questions in a way that provides us what we need to be comfortable including your project on the list. And typically we have some follow-up questions that we have reached out to you in the past for, so be prepared to respond to our questions if we think something is incomplete or want something clarified. That will be done through the online system as well. So once you've submitted, we'll get notified. We'll do the review. If we have questions, we'll respond within the system back to you for you to go in and make some modifications and address our questions. We'll also communicate with you via email just to make sure there's no confusion. And as always, Aaron, Tom, and I will be available over the application period to take your calls, set up virtual meetings, walk you through, help you with anything that you need to get your project submitted. Step 4 is really on us as the consultants to MPOAC. We'll develop the lists. We'll develop the state highway system roadway list just like we have in the past. That'll be shared with our DOT partners, both central office freight office, as well as the district freight coordinators. And then we'll also have the non-state highway system roadway project list, which will also be shared with DOT and any other key partners that we determine. This is the first year we're doing that, so we'll be looking for some insights and lessons learned from you all kind of post-application period for that second set of projects. Both lists will go in step 5 through our approval process. We'll be meeting with our MPOAC Freight Committee on April 27th and with the staff directors and governing board on April 25th for them to sign off and endorse on the list of projects that you all have submitted. And then that will be transmitted, excuse me, to Florida DOT. Any questions about this flow? Okay, quiet bunch. Let's move to the next slide. So we have prepared for you, similar to previous years, detailed instructions that you can have kind of at your fingertips as you're going through the online systems so that you know exactly what you need to enter for each of the questions that we're asking you. I'm going to walk through this in just a moment. But the instruction sheet, so the first page or two really kind of gives you key things you need to know, a lot of which I just went through on the previous slides. And then for the instruction form, which you see in the kind of that top right corner, we've color coded the system so you can see which questions need to be answered only for the traditional state highway system projects, and then the questions that apply to all projects. So we've tried to make it as simple as possible. And for the new types of projects, we've tried to keep what we're asking for a little bit limited, since they're going to be a different type of information that's potentially available for those type of projects. So let me get my screen ready to share. All right, and can you all see the instruction sheet? Tom, can you see it?
Yes, we got it now, Mike.
All right, great. So as I mentioned, the first page or two really is a lot of what we just went over. It talks about the changes to the program that we've just talked about. It talks about the 3 traditional projects you can submit and what those requirements are. It talks about the requirements for this for the second 3. It talks about the training programs that we're providing. So again, this is one of your key resource documents that we'll be sending out shortly. 2 90-minute Zoom training webinars. You're in the first one, which is giving you the background information. The second one, as I mentioned, is going to be on March 15th. Same time frame, same time, same length of time. And that's, again, going to be focused on how you actually use the new system. So again, gives you the portal once it's active, provides you contact information for both Tom and Aaron, who are going to be available to support any of the questions you have while you're completing your applications. We talk again about collaborating with your district freight coordinators. This is something that we have made a more formalized requirement as part of our projects in the last couple of years, just to make sure that your DOT partner is aware of what your priorities are and is sharing with you what their priorities are. And we found out last year, in many cases, there's huge overlap in those priorities. So it allows you to work to promote those projects together. Aaron will walk through a checklist that we have to encourage that behavior after I've gone through the instructions here. Submit questions on the outlines. So again, we'll have a slide near the end that kind of goes through all the timeframes as far as when you need to do it, but April 6th will be our due date with the applications system call for projects going live on March 16th after the training. As I mentioned, 2 aggregated lists will be prepared. This is the approval process we talked about right here. And then transmitting to all the various folks at DOT, central office, different offices there. Important to reach out to different offices there because different offices control different funding pots, and also partnering with the district offices and Federal Highway as well. Federal Highway has been a very active participant in our MPOAC freight committee. And they've been great partners as we've put this program together and followed it over the last several years. And then key that not part of our process of training you for how to do this and your application process, but once this list exists, once you have projects on this list, item number 9 is something that we all need to do a better job each year than we've done for the first 4, which is how do we promote and champion these projects moving forward. So just providing, like, we will provide the list to your DOT partners. Once that list has been submitted, there should be additional follow-up both by MPOAC from subcommittee, MPOAC staff, as well as each of you to work with your DOT partners to encourage them to use this and incorporate this into their funding decisions over the course of the summer when they're doing their update to their work program. So specifically what goes into the application, everything that's in the purpley light blue, these are questions that need to be answered for all project types. And then the green boxes are questions that only apply to those traditional on-state highway system projects. Basically what that means is we've eliminated some number of the questions for the off-state highway system projects, just because they're not at the same level. They don't necessarily apply to how we originally set the application up. So looking at the general information, a lot of this, for those of you who've completed this, there's not a lot of new questions here. So what is the project name? We're looking for, how does this project appear in your TIP, your work program, your long range plan? How have you documented it? So what's that formal name? What's the facility that it's on? If it's a roadway system, it could be a state highway number. It could be an actual name of the roadway. If it's not a roadway project, then you would need to provide the facility name, whether it was a rail corridor, a railroad, or a truck stop or a truck parking facility that you were looking at. Then we're asking you to select your project category. This is new from last year, because this is where we're allowing you to pick one of those 4 types. So the first one is what the only option you had in previous years, state highway system roadway. These are the new projects types that we have opened the program up for that second set of 3 projects. So a non-state highway system roadway project, that would be any roadway in your community that has a freight priority need or project on it that is not a state road. So any of your arterials, primary arterials, minor arterials, first last mile into a major freight facility, whatever the case may be, that gives you an opportunity to highlight some roadways that you may not have been able to do in the past. Intermodal logistics center access. And if you need to work with us on what the definition of an ILC is, different folks have different definitions of that. But basically it's going to be, as simple as a major warehouse or distribution center. Could be a rail yard with some warehousing capacities around it. Any kind of major freight activity center that's moving products in and out for a number of users could be defined that way. So if you have a major area like that and you need roadway improvements to it, this is the type of project that we would want to see included here. For some communities around the state, they've actually branded and defined such and such intermodal logistics center. So in that case, it's easy. But if you don't have a place that you've necessarily defined that way, but it's a freight activity center, please reach out and talk to us if you have a project that you'd like to include, and let's talk about it. Truck parking, and that's self-explanatory, basically a location where trucks can park, stage, overnight, short-term, whatever your community's needs are. That projects are pretty flexible there. And then for rail, we've looked at both CIS and non-CIS rail corridors as projects that you could include here. We've distinguished between the two because of the difference in funding, right? So if it's a CIS rail project, then we want to make sure we're sharing that with the CIS, with systems planning in DOT in central office and with the folks in charge of CIS and in your district. And if it's a non-CIS rail project, then that's a different set of folks that we need to communicate that priority to. This choice is going to dictate whether you have to answer the green shaded boxes. So if you pick state highway system roadway, then you have to answer everything in this. If you pick any of the others, then you don't have to answer the green boxes. And you don't have to remember that, because the system that we've created online, once you check this from the drop-down box, it's going to take you to all the questions that you need to answer. So you don't have to think about it, but as far as looking in these instructions, that's where you're going to find the appropriate instructions. We ask if there are any other MPOs involved in your project. So for some of you, you may be partnering on a longer corridor project with your adjacent MPO. This is an opportunity to identify that. There's a handful of you that are multi-county MPOs, and a lot of you that are single county MPOs. So we're also interested in whether or not the project cuts across county lines. Again, just trying to understand the impact and geographic dimensions of the project. These are all from the previous application. Any private partners involved in the project. I think we moved this up from later in the application, but this is a more relevant now that we're looking at those other types of projects, right? Because if it's a truck parking facility, it may be in a public-private partnership. If it's a rail project or an ILC access project, you may be working with a developer and partnering with somebody like that. So we would expect for that second type project category, a greater likelihood that the answer would be yes here. Whereas for most of the applications over the last 4 years, most of you would have answered no to this. Is this a district freight coordinator project priority? Yes or no? This of course requires you to coordinate with your district freight coordinator and find out if it is one of their priorities. Moving on, select the project type. This is the same as it was before. So is it capacity, new connection, reconstruction, management and operations, which looks at ITS treatments, TSM&O treatments? Is it a maintenance project or an other? You can specify what other. You can select one or all, whatever is the appropriate to describe your project. Again, this is consistent with what has been around for the last several applications. Give a brief project description and describe the project rationale. These are two questions that you might think sound similar, but the brief project description really is, what is the project? So for example, if you're widening a roadway, don't say widening a roadway, say widening a roadway from 4 to 6 lanes. We need to understand when we're looking at it, what is the project? What is this investment going to accomplish? Whereas describe the project rationale is, why is this project a freight priority for your MPO? So we'd be looking for a detailed statement on how that project advances goods movement in Florida. You could say it provides additional roadway capacity to address highway freight bottleneck. And you also can ask your district freight coordinator what details would be most helpful. And there are examples given from the National Highway Freight Program on eligible activities for funding. And also CIS funding eligibility requirements are provided as well. So when you're looking for your project rationale, if you can tie it to what some of the different funding programs are trying to accomplish or activities that are eligible within those funding programs, that gives you kind of a step up by saying, hey, what I want done is on the list of things that the National Highway Freight Program will pay for, or is on the list of things that the CIS program will pay for. So it just helps to understand what that would look like. If it is one of your state highway system projects, you'll see these are all things from the application you've all completed for the last 4 years. What is the FM number? What is the FDOT roadway ID number? What is the direction of the project? So is it northbound, westbound, southbound? Is it both directions? You know, so different projects are looking at different types of improvements. What is the extent of the project? So this is, again, a question we asked before. How you answer this is going to be based on what kind of project it is. So we had asked for state highway system projects in the past for you to give us mileposts from and to, right? If it's a grade, if it's a grade crossing, or if it's a rail corridor project, or it's a truck parking project, then you're going to have to provide a more detailed description or geographic reference or intersection of roadways, whatever lets people understand a property ID, whatever communicates where that actual physical property is would be what you'd want to put in here. Again, for the state roadways, this is where you can have the from and to points that I just mentioned above. We also have asked you, and this one we've expanded. This used to just say, what is the existing activity? What is the existing truck activity on your roadway? We're looking for truck ADT or truck percent, right? Now we're saying, okay, well, we have more than just roadway projects eligible here. So we still want to know what the existing activity is, but that could be truck traffic, could be number of trains, could be truck parking capacity, could be site acreage if it's an ILC type property. So describe either what your ideal activity would, kind of what you anticipate the activity being, or what the activity is today that's going to help us understand what's happening that this project is going to help address and or allow you to grow. What are the costs in millions, or what are the costs of the project? We say in millions because most of these infrastructure projects will be more than 1 million, but certainly if it's a smaller operational project, it could be less than that. But we're looking here, what's the project cost? And then similar to before, what is your requested action? So this is where you get to tell us how much money are you looking for? When are you looking for it? So are you looking to allocate new funding to an unfunded project or a partially funded project? Are you looking to advance funding to an earlier year in the program? For those of you who, if you think of the work program, the application has that table that we fill in. You might have a major construction project that has your preliminary PD&E, preliminary engineering, right-of-way acquisition, design and construction. So in this case, if you want to accelerate the construction, you may also need to be asking for the acceleration of all of those previous steps. So this is your opportunity to say, hey, this is a top priority. This is how I want to change what's in the work program here today. And it could be shifting what's in there already or adding additional funding in there if it's currently unfunded. What funding programs is the project eligible for? So this is an opportunity, if you know, right? If it's on the SIS, it'll be eligible for SIS. If it's on the National Highway Freight Network, it will be available for that. There may be other funding programs you're aware of. So this is just an opportunity for you to identify for us which funding pots you are aware of that you're trying to influence. We also ask you to upload any project GIS shapefiles that are available. So if it's a roadway project that you've already documented in your long range plan, your MTP, or your TIP, you're most likely going to have, and you've already done some of the design and right away and all that stuff, you're probably going to have GIS information available that you can share with us. And whereas we tried to have you get it to us in whatever way you could before, our new program will allow you to upload any documents and shape files and databases that you want to provide as part of your application can be attached and uploaded as part of the online program. Project schedule and funding status. So again, this is what I was just talking about. It's hard to see in a table like this, but if you think, and when Erin's going to walk through an actual project example in the old format for any of you who haven't completed one before, when she's talking in a few minutes, then you'll see what we're talking about by what that table looks like. But again, it's 5 years, all the funding courses. What are you trying to influence? And it's better to show when we get to the example. And then if the PD&E phase is not shown for the state highway system projects, because maybe it was completed in a previous 5-year work program and it's kind of, you're into the implementation now, there's places in the form to provide additional information as far as where, what version of the work program has that information in it. And again, you can provide a URL to the older version of the work program, a page number, project reference number, whatever you need to do to source that PD&E has been funded and completed. Our last set of questions in the application, again, consistent to what we've had before, are screening questions. Fairly quick and easy to answer if you are familiar with your project. Is the project identified as a freight priority by your MPO or any of your partners? So hopefully it is. If it's something you're putting on your freight priority list, we're asking you to select yes or no. And if yes, tell us where it's identified as a freight priority. It could be in your, if you have a regional freight plan, it can be documented in there. The project could be in your TIP or your long range plan. If it's a railroad project, it could be a project that your rail partner has identified as a priority. If it's access to an airport or a seaport, they may have identified it in their CIP or their master plan. So lots of different ways you could identify that it is part of a freight priority, that it's one of your freight priorities. Identify the plan that the document that the project is included in. Could be a freight plan, as I mentioned, your MTP, your TIP, your SIP, master plans. I think we all are very familiar with the fact that in order for funding to be put on a project, it needs to be in a plan. So this is just that this is your opportunity to tell us where it's documented, links to those documents, page numbers, reference numbers, etc. Is the project on a priority freight network? So this could be, as I mentioned, it could be the SIS, it could be the National Highway Freight Network. It could be if you have designated a regionally significant freight network in your region, that would be something you could document as well and tie it to your freight plan. We also want you to identify, as I mentioned earlier in the overview of previous years, which of Florida's transportation plan goals does your project support? We provide, in the past, we've provided a lookup table, but on the online system, you can click and you will be able to see, here are the goals and the objectives of the FTP to make sure you understand which ones you're checking and that they apply to the project that you're picking. And does the project have any matching funds? Again, previous years, I don't think, I'd be surprised, but I don't think we've ever had somebody say yes. Most of these are, if it was on the state highway system, they're almost 100% funded by government. But now that we've expanded it to a different type of project to be included, you may in fact have either some other public or some private partners who are funding, helping advance this project with you. So that is the end of the actual questions and instructions. You can see, for those of you who filled it out before, not a lot of new stuff here, just some stuff to allow you to enter different types of projects. Any questions on what I've just presented before we go through checklists and an example project?
I'm just going to say that was very thorough, Mike. So I don't know if anybody would have any questions.
Okay, so let's go back to the presentation for a minute. Tom and Erin can walk through her handful of slides, and then she can walk you through an example project.
All right, are we back on the presentation screen?
Yes, we are.
All right. Go ahead, Erin.
All right, thanks, Tom. So the first checklist I'm going to talk about will be a checklist to work with your district freight coordinators. This one is much shorter than the instructions that Mike just presented on. As you can see, this first page of it really just kind of talks about why it's important to coordinate with them. And then just a few questions about that coordination. I'll show the document in a minute. Tom, if you want to go to the next slide. The second checklist that I'll go through with you is about if you are resubmitting projects. So for those of you who have submitted projects in the past, we are uploading those submissions from last year into the portal. So hopefully that cuts down on a lot of the information that you need to put in yourself. We just have certain items that might be new, that might have changed a little bit, that we just want to double check. And then the last thing I will go over on the next slide is an example project. So the one we'll be going through is from the Bay County TPO. This one was one of the 6 that was submitted last year that received funding. So this kind of shows the level of detail that we're looking for as you're submitting these projects. So now I'll go through in a little bit more detail what those checklists are. If I can share my screen. Can you see my screen with the DFC checklist?
Yes, we can see it. Yeah.
Awesome. So as I mentioned, this first page really just talks about why coordinating with your district freight coordinator is important. They're the ones who work with the different federal and state funding processes, and they also are creating their own district priority project list. As a reminder, the Freight Priorities program that we're talking about here is an MPO program. And so you are the ones that we be submitting your own projects, not DOT. But there may be overlap in those projects between the district and your MPO. And so it's really beneficial because that helps with some of those internal project scoring processes. And so you want to make sure that your district freight coordinator is aware that you are submitting these projects to help with that scoring process, to help better compete for some of those funds. And so on our checklist, obviously, make sure you know who your district freight coordinator is. If you don't, then you can work with Holly Cohen. There's also a link here that will direct you to where those freight coordinators are and their contact information. You want to let your DFC know that you're submitting a project. Ask them for what their projects are on their district priority list. Compare the list with the projects that you're considering. Understand which differences may exist between the lists. There may be various reasons why they're not being considered, funding reasons, a newer project. Maybe they already have a lot of other projects on their list. And then you are going to select your 6 projects. Again, that's the 3 projects on the state highway system. That's from last year and from the prior years. And then the non-state highway system projects that are new for this year. And so obviously, if they do align with your freight coordinators list, then you want to make sure that your information matches what they have and they can help you out with that. So are there any questions on the checklist? Hearing none, I will move on to the resubmittal checklist, which, can you see the resubmittal checklist now?
Yep, it's visible.
Awesome. So this is only if you've submitted a project in 2021. As I mentioned, they are being uploaded into that new portal that will be available after the next training session. So this will hopefully help you out with filling it out and, spend a little less time on it, verifying what you've submitted before. So there's a few portions in particular that we want you to focus on that have changed or, that have just changed over the years. There is a new question that Mike mentioned about identifying private partners that might be involved in the project. As with the district freight coordinator checklist, their list may have also changed over the years. So this may now be a priority project for them, or it may no longer be a priority. Update existing activity, freight activities, truck activities, things of that nature. Your funding tables may have changed. I believe we've asked for the information from the 5-year work program and then the second 5-year. And so since those tables have been updated and obviously construction costs have changed quite a bit recently, that's probably a particular area that you want to focus on. You may have a change in the requested action. We've also added a question about what funding programs the project is eligible for. If you have new GIS data, the Florida Transportation Plan goals have been updated, so there may be a shift in some of your project goals. Confirm local funding amounts, make sure that links for your project work, and then also see if there's any blank fields that may have occurred due to processing and inputting this application. So are there any questions about the resubmittal checklist? Okay, hearing none. The last set of materials that I'll go over is a prior project. So this is still in the old format. This is how we used to take it in a Word document. This information, again, will be uploaded into the portal, but for right now, we're going to look at it in this format. So I don't believe this has any of the new questions that we've added since they weren't there last year. So you can see we have the names, counties involved, facility names, project names, all the stuff that Mike went over before. The instruction sheet will help you fill out this information. So, Mike talked about what we're looking for a project description. So 6 laning of State Route 75, we want to add 2 additional lanes, and then you add the more detailed project rationale here. Scrolling down a little bit, this is where you'll see that DOT work program money is coming in with URLs to where the project is, the project reference number. This is, if the PD&E isn't shown in this 5 years, then this is where that information is. And, they've provided a link again. Their defined requested action is funding for construction, and they've also linked to GIS shape files.
I just want to pause right there. Aaron, if you could just go back up. So that right there defined the defined request for action. That is one of the most important pieces of information that we need from you, is a clear understanding of what you are looking for. So the project description and rationale and what the actual project is lets us know what the overall project is. But this is where you get to tell us what's missing from advancing your project. So make sure and provide, in this case, it's fund construction. So the project was not fully funded and they were looking for construction funding. So that's a critical part of where you're telling us, if we can come up with money and we're going to make a decision and we're going to pick your project, what are you looking for? So keep that in mind.
Great, thanks, Mike. And the remaining questions are those screening questions that Mike went over about, is this project identified as a freight priority and by whom? Please identify plans that it's involved in, and please give us these reference numbers, since many of you have very long plans and flipping through all of them would take quite a while. Is it on a priority freight network? And here is the alignment with the FTP goals. As a reminder, these have changed a little bit since last year with the update to the FTP. So this will be an area where you want to double check if you are resubmitting a project, as well as the matching local funds. And so are there any questions on this prior project submittal? Any questions about what kind of detail we're looking for? Things of that nature.
This is Paul. So just for the group here, so essentially the information that you're going to be asking for the state highway system projects are going to be fairly similar to what you're asking for the non-state highway system projects, correct?
Correct.
Except for, of course, a couple of tweaks if they're rail and things of that nature.
Yes, there's a few differences. I think one of the larger ones is that some of those projects may not be in the work program. Mike and Tom, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. I don't believe we've asked for this for those non-state highway system projects.
Right, but as much as possible, what you're asking for is the same, other than, yeah, this is not something that's already programmed.
Correct.
Okay.
And that's correct. We are not asking for this table to be filled out. We have other questions that get at that. And Paul, some of the questions, when I went through the instructions, as you recall, we broadened some of the terminology so that they worked for additional types of projects. And then, so it's largely the same. That's a great example, Aaron. The extent of project milepost and extent of project intersection. We're not asking both of those questions for non-state highway system projects, but we are if it is a state highway system project, because we want the from and to mileposts, etc. if it's a state highway project. But if it's not, we're giving you more flexibility in what you can provide for information. So there are a couple questions like that where we've kind of broadened the definition of what we're looking for so that you can address multiple types of projects. And anything that was specifically tied to FDOT work program type stuff, which would only apply to a state highway system project, those questions are not asked for the other type of projects.
Right, like you said, because of it's an online, the moment you answer a specific question a certain way, it automatically, removes those things from consideration.
Correct.
Right.
Any other questions? Hearing none, I think, Tom, you can go back to the presentation. And as a reminder, we will be providing these documents to you. So if you do have questions moving forward, feel free to email myself, Tom, or Mike, and our contact information will be at the end of this presentation.
All right, thank you, Aaron. So going from that old form that Aaron just went over, We are now going to take a look at what the online portal is going to look at, where you will be able to submit all of those project applications using the new format. So it's currently going through its last tweaks. We're uploading all of the prior project data from last year into the system and going through the last tests to get it ready. And it will be ready for a full demo on March 15th in that second training session. So we'll go through an actual project submittal. But currently I have here some screenshots of what the system will look like and where it's at. You can see on this left-hand screenshot here is going to be your login page. You will be able to log into a agency-specific login, and that will have that will be allowed for a single login per agency. So anyone within the agency can log in and get to the project to contribute to the application. From there, you will be sent to a launch page that will look similar to this on the right-hand side. This one you are seeing here is actually what we, the consultants, will see with all the agency's projects. Yours will just contain your agency's projects. It'll give you the name of the project, whether it goes on that state highway system list or the other non-state highway system list, so you can keep track of which projects you've submitted for each list. And it also will have built-in limits that will limit the numbers of projects you're allowed to submit for each list, so you don't go over that 3 limit for each list. Also, you can see that the project questions will be broken down into 3 categories. I don't know if you caught when Mike was going through the instruction sheet, there were 3 main sections: a general info section, a project info section, and then that last screening question section. But that is broken up into 3 different sections within the online system. So if you want to just complete the first section one day, save your progress, and then go on and wait till the next day or the next week to finish it, you have that option to save your progress. And when you log out, it'll stay saved. And when you log back in, it'll be ready to go for that next step. And it also features a submit button. So once you're happy with the progress you've made on your application, it's all filled out, you'll be able to hit that submit button. It will automatically alert the consultant team here that a project's been submitted, and we can directly go in and start the review process. So also noting on this launch page, you will, if you submitted projects in the past year, you will see those old oh, do we have a question?
Thomas, yeah, just a quick question. And this is again for the good of the group.
Yes.
Once you hit submit, do you get a notice, obviously, but does the system also send a notice to the person that submitted the project?
Yeah, I believe we're going to have that email the agency, whoever the contact was designated, either the if they're a member of the committee, they'll be a member and the alternate that will probably get the email, or if they're the friend of the committee, if they're not a full member, that person would get the email confirmation that a project was submitted.
Okay.
Okay. Yep. And then the consultants, once that happens, we will go in and be able to do the review process and be able to send questions directly through the portal back to whoever is in charge of the contact for the agency for the FPP application here. So if we move on, this will give you a kind of look of what the questioning will look like once you actually enter a project submission. So you can see just real streamlined kind of questioning here. You got your text box entries. There's also drop-down boxes that are now added. Instead of having to type all the information, you'll have check marks, as we can see here in the question about the FTP goals. So we're trying to cut down on the amount of work and typing that you have to do for these entries to make it easier for each agency. As I mentioned, there is this save draft. So at any point while you're filling out an application, you can save the draft and come back to it at a later time. And there are also verifications built into the system. So as Paul, you had been mentioning, will the system know if you're doing that expanded set of questions or the less restrictive non-state highway system questions? That will all be decided basically on this question here, where you choose the project category. Once you continue on from this first general project question phase and hit continue, the system will automatically know to only give you the specified questions for that project type. All right, you'll also have the opportunity here to be able to upload directly links, and then also that GIS file in a zip file format will be uploaded directly into the portal here. So that is kind of a quick brief overview of what the system's looking like. Like I said, on March 15th in the second session, we will actually dive in and go and submit a full project and do a deep dive on the online application. But are there any questions now? Yes, go ahead, Ricardo.
This is Lucine. Once you've submitted an application, can you, along with the verification email, do you get a copy of the actual application, or is it printable as a PDF? Do you get something other than what's in the portal?
I think it's all based online. I know the data's fit to us in a certain format. I don't know if it is printable, but I can definitely find that out and bring that into the next session with an answer.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
one of the things we had talked about with our system developer was extensive reporting capabilities. So I would assume that, although we all know assuming is a bad thing to do, we will check and make sure that it is something that can be downloaded as a PDF. And you also, of course, will be able to log back in and look at it once it's been submitted. So we just need to double check on a couple of the functionalities, which is why we're not demoing it until the 15th, because we have a few things like this to work out. So the fact you asked that question will help us hopefully make sure that the answer is yes by the 15th.
And will each person that uses this format or portal need their own ID? So if we're applying for one application or several, we can share information. In other words, one can go in and start the application and another can continue the application, or is it based on the user?
It'll be based on the agency. So each agency will get their own login, and that login can be used by multiple users.
At the same time?
It might be limited to one person at a time. Not quite exactly sure on that, but we can find that out for you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right. So next we'll go over the roles and responsibilities, and we'll start with those on the agency side. So your first kind of responsibility after this meeting is to start to compile those freight projects that you want to put onto the list. Make sure you kind of have that designation between the state highway system and non-state highway system, because you'll be limited to 3 for each of those lists. Agencies will also be responsible for using the DFC checklist that Aaron went over. So they want to make sure that you're working with your coordinator as you're choosing these projects and preparing them for submission. Once you've gone through that process of compiling all the information you need and working with your coordinator, then you will want to submit those chosen projects to the online application portal. And you can use that instruction guide that Mike just went over during your submittal process, and also as you're gathering the data for the submittal. And then we ask that you are available for follow-up questions. It's important that you are responsive if there are questions, so we can make sure all the projects are completed and ready for preparation for the final list on time. And then after the process is over and the list has been approved, we ask that you use the completed list to advocate for your projects. Now the roles and responsibilities on the consultant side. We are providing the 2 training webinars. Obviously, you're in the one here today. And then on March 15th, we will be going through that second webinar with the focus being the online application portal. And also our developer will be in that meeting, so he can answer any of the more technical questions that we may not know. But we will be testing it thoroughly this next week and a half. So by that time, we should be very familiar with the process. We will also be available for technical support and one-on-one consultation during the application period. So if you need any help at any time, you can email us, you can set up a virtual call or call us. We'll be happy to help and make sure you are confident in your submission. After all the submissions have gone through on that April 6th date, we will go through and make sure they have met all the requirements and that they are ready for the addition to the 2 lists. We'll prepare the finalized list, and then we will present the finalized list to the MPOAC for their approval. And once they've been approved by the MPOAC, we will then transmit the list to FDOT. All right, and I'll now go through the schedule that we're looking at. So the 15th, we are looking at that second training session. That's where we'll go through the deep dive on the online application portal. And then the day after that, the portal will open for all the agencies, and they can begin the actual submittal process of the projects. On April 6th, we are asking that all the projects have been submitted by then. That will be our cutoff date. And then on April 27th, after we've prepared the finalized lists, we will present them at the committee meeting on the 27th. And then the following day also at the staff directors and governing board meeting. And then on May of this year, we will then transmit the list to FDOT.
The only thing I would add is between the 6th and 27th, obviously as close to the 6th as possible, will be when you receive any follow-up questions from us.
Thank you, Mike. All right, and then the next steps we're asking for after this meeting. We want you to, well, first, we're going to send you all the documents from the meeting, presentation, the support documents that Mike and Aaron had covered previously, and also the recording of this session will be sent out. It's going to be sent out in an email with a link to a SharePoint that will contain all the documents in it. And then there will also be a link that will go to a private YouTube link where you can view this recording again. So then after you receive those, we ask that you collaborate within your agency on choosing which projects that you would like to submit. And you can use the instruction sheet to begin collecting the necessary data for those submissions. And then on the second session on March 15th, you can bring any questions that may have come up as you were trying to gather data or pick projects for submission. We'll be happy to answer any questions that you had on those submissions. All right, are there any other further questions?
And if you don't have any questions, if you have any reaction or observations about this training, we are always looking for ways to improve. You can certainly email us, type it in the chat, or feel free to share with us right now if you have any feedback for us.
Well, my only feedback is I'm looking forward to the online portal. And hopefully it'll be a lot smoother process moving forward for all of us who have to input these projects.
I think that ability too for projects to be saved from year to year will be a good addition too if you resubmit the projects a lot.
Absolutely.
Again, this is Mark. I just want to say that you guys did a great job, very thorough, and you know, you guys covered just about every possible angle you can come at with this. So very appreciative.
I have one more comment. Since the next training session, you guys will be going through the deep dive with the online portal, and it is going to be recorded. May I suggest that you send that recording to everyone that participated at this session? So if we don't participate in the next session, that we'll have it and we'll be able to review it.
Yeah, we will do a follow-up email the same way we're gonna do after this meeting tomorrow. Any documentation, I don't think we have any documents for the next one, but if there are, those will be added to the SharePoint, and then there will also be another YouTube link provided in the follow-up email.
Right, so one of the things that we will, hopefully, we need to chat with our developer as well, Tom, but I would think that the one thing we would have to follow the next training session would be kind of a one-pager cheat sheet on how to use the system. So we'll demo the system, you'll walk through and see, and a lot of it's going to be super self-explanatory, hopefully, as you go through, just like we've all taken so many online surveys over the last year or two. It's built, as you saw from the screenshots, to be fairly similar. So it's going to be, I think, self-explanatory, but we will have a quick cheat sheet of functionality considerations, like make sure and hit save, or how to get back in if something's partially done, or so that will be the only document before. And just to be clear, the recording and the materials that we went over today will go to the full MPO list, Paul, so that even folks who didn't make today's training will be up to date on everything we've trained you folks on prior to the 15th.
Outstanding.
Yeah, and one other thing about the documents too, I've talked with the developer and he said it would be possible to have all of these support documents uploaded into the launch page of the portal. So you'll have them right when you log in too. You won't have to go searching for them. Okay. Any other questions? All right. I want to thank everyone for coming to this session. Hope it was informative and is going to give you a starting point to start gathering projects and getting data for those projects. So you come to the next one ready to submit those and take what you learn about the online portal and run with it. Yep. Thank you very much, everyone.